It was just past noon on a Monday when Dr. Evelyn Carter felt her phone vibrating in her coat pocket. She was elbow-deep in a thoracic procedure at St. Anne's Medical Center in Boston, the kind of delicate surgery that required every ounce of her concentration. She rarely looked at her phone while in the OR, but this vibration didn't stop. It pulsed again and again. Something about it felt urgent. She didn't check it immediately. She finished closing the incision first, gave her post-op notes, and stepped out of the surgical suite. She peeled off her gloves and face shield and reached for the phone with one hand, still feeling the buzz. One missed call. Another one. Then a message. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The message was short. Just a few words. Your daughter is in ICU. Suspected overdose. Reno General. The phone slipped out of her hand and hit the floor with a sharp crack. She didn't speak. Didn't cry. She just stood there, staring blankly at the cold tiled floor of the surgical wing. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. Then instinct kicked in. She picked up the phone and started moving, fast. The hours that followed were a blur. Informing the hospital board, rescheduling patients, booking a last-minute flight to Nevada. There was no room in her mind for logic. She just knew one thing. Natalie was in trouble. And this time, it wasn't the kind of trouble you could fix with a lecture, a credit card, or a late-night phone call. This was different. On the plane to Reno, Evelyn stared out the window but didn't see the clouds. Her thoughts circled in chaotic fragments. Memories, regrets, the echo of words she wished she'd said. She thought about the day Natalie was born, how perfect her little fingers were, how she'd cried the moment Evelyn had held her. She thought about the first time Natalie came home crying from school because the other kids made fun of her glasses. She thought about the way Natalie hugged her on the day she was accepted into Nevada State University for pre-med. She thought about everything she had sacrificed to give her daughter the life she never had. Evelyn hadn't always lived in Boston. She was born and raised in a small town in Kentucky, the kind of place where dreams had boundaries and ambitions were trimmed down to something more realistic. Her parents were factory workers. No one in her family had gone to college, let alone medical school. But Evelyn was different. She wanted more. And she earned it. By the time she was 32, she was a cardiothoracic surgeon with a fellowship in trauma medicine. She had a stable career, a house in the suburbs, and one daughter, Natalie, the only thing in her life that mattered more than the job. But that dream started fraying years ago. Natalie's father, Marcus Reed, had been a charming and ambitious young tech consultant when they met. Their relationship burned bright and fast. They got married after 9 months of dating. Natalie came just a year later. And then reality hit. Marcus's job took him around the country. Evelyn's career demanded long hours in the hospital. They barely saw each other. When they did, they were tired, distant, disconnected. When Natalie turned 4, the divorce papers were signed. Marcus moved to Seattle. Evelyn got full custody. Marcus still sent birthday cards and money. But that was all. The calls grew less frequent. And soon they stopped entirely. Evelyn did what she knew best. She worked harder. She provided for Natalie, enrolled her in the best schools, cooked dinner when she could, helped with science projects at 2 a.m., and tried, desperately, to be both mother and father. And for a while it worked. Natalie was bright, curious, strong-willed. She wanted to be a doctor, just like her mother. Evelyn beamed with pride when Natalie got into Nevada State, even though it meant her daughter would move across the country. She supported the decision. Distance wasn't the enemy, she told herself. Independence was necessary. Healthy even. But something shifted after that. The calls from Natalie became shorter, less frequent. Her Instagram, once filled with study notes and dorm selfies, transformed into a gallery of high-gloss snapshots, nightclubs, rooftop brunches, designer outfits. It started slowly. A tagged photo here. A story about champagne at 11 a.m. there. Then came the viral post, a sultry mirror selfie captioned, "Doctor in the making, but make it fashion." The likes poured in. So did the followers. Thousands of them. Evelyn watched from a distance, unsure how to react. The rational part of her said it was harmless, just a phase. The mother in her felt an ache she couldn't name. She tried to talk to Natalie. asked how school was going, if she was sleeping well, eating right. Natalie always said the same thing, "I'm fine, Mom. Chill." But something felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the warmth was fading from her daughter's voice. The calls became irregular. Replies came late, sometimes not at all. She once video called her and saw the bags under her eyes, the too wide smile, the disheveled apartment in the background. But Natalie brushed it off. "Just finals week," she'd said. "Don't worry." Evelyn worried anyway. She began checking her social media obsessively. She once zoomed into a picture to see if Natalie had lost weight. She had. Another photo. Her pupils looked dilated. Maybe it was just the lighting. Or maybe it wasn't. The plane began to descend. Evelyn's fingers dug into the armrest as the engines roared. The flight attendant smiled and offered her water. She didn't hear her. What if Natalie didn't wake up? What if the last thing she ever said to her daughter was, "You need to grow up and stop acting like a child"? She had said that 3 weeks ago. During an argument over money, Natalie had asked for $800 to cover miscellaneous living expenses. Evelyn had asked what for. Natalie had hung up. Evelyn never called back. And now here she was, miles above the ground, hurtling toward a hospital in Nevada, praying it wasn't too late to say she was sorry. She landed at Reno Tahoe Airport just before midnight. The cold desert wind slapped her face the moment she stepped outside. Her ride, a hospital shuttle arranged in haste, was waiting. As the van sped toward the hospital, she stared at the lights of the sleeping city. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years. But tonight, she felt it swelling in her throat, unspoken and unbearable. Then came the moment. The automatic doors slid open. The fluorescent lights stung her eyes. She approached the front desk. "I'm Dr. Evelyn Carter. My daughter, Natalie Reed. I was told she was admitted tonight." The nurse's expression darkened. "Yes, ma'am. She's in critical care. Room 302. I'll take you up." The elevator ride was silent. And as the doors opened and she stepped into the ICU hallway, the hum of machines filled her ears. Room 302 was just ahead. She took one step forward and stopped. Her heart pounding. Her fingers numb. The hallway stretched like a tunnel. At the end of it, behind a glass door, was the beginning of something far more horrifying than she had ever faced in her years in trauma medicine. This time, it wasn't just about saving a life. It was about uncovering what had broken it. Room 302 was dimly lit, the only glow coming from a cluster of machines that beeped in quiet rhythm. Evelyn Carter stood at the glass door, her hand hovering inches from the handle, frozen. On the other side of the pane, her daughter, once full of spark, mischief, ambition, lay pale, unmoving, with tubes running from her nose and 4 ports in both arms. She looked smaller than Evelyn remembered. Fragile. The nurse beside her offered a gentle nod. "She's stable. But unresponsive. She's been sedated." Evelyn stepped in slowly. The smell of antiseptic hit her first, sterile and cold. Then came the sound, oxygen flow, heart monitor, the faintest rattle in Natalie's breath. She sat beside the bed and stared for a long moment. This wasn't supposed to be how it turned out. Not for them. Natalie Reed had always been the kind of child who challenged the world, stubborn in a way that could charm strangers but infuriate her teachers. When Evelyn was working 16-hour shifts during her residency, Natalie was home alone with boxed dinners and math homework. They had their routine, cereal for dinner on Tuesdays, FaceTime Friday, calls with silly filters, but Evelyn always knew it wasn't enough. The guilt had never left her. Not when Natalie brought home straight A's. Not even when she got into college. Because no number of achievements could fix the cracks formed in those quiet, lonely years. Evelyn did what she could to overcompensate. Money, new clothes, trips, electronics, a Jeep Wrangler on her 18th birthday, all of it, she told herself, was just what any single mother with means would do. But love isn't measured by gifts. And Evelyn was beginning to realize, maybe Natalie had known that all along. Sitting there, Evelyn looked around the room. The bag Natalie had brought to the hospital was on the chair across the room. A tan leather tote, unzipped. Evelyn hesitated, then slowly walked over. Inside were the usual things: wallet, charger, a bottle of perfume, gum. And tucked inside a side pocket, a prescription bottle. She picked it up. Alprazolam. Empty. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a one-time accident. This was a pattern. She put the bottle down, hands trembling. A folded paper fell out beside it. It was an ER discharge summary, dated 2 months ago. Another overdose. One that Evelyn had never heard about. How many had there been? How long had this been happening? How could her daughter be slipping away and she, a doctor, hadn't even seen it? She sat back down by Natalie's side, brushing a strand of hair off her forehead. "You used to tell me you wanted to be just like me," Evelyn whispered. "But maybe I should have tried harder to be like you." Her voice cracked, but no tears came. Just silence. She stayed with Natalie the rest of the night. At some point, she must have fallen asleep with her head resting on the side of the bed, because the next thing she remembered was the morning light spilling through the blinds. The doctor came in during rounds. A young man with kind eyes and a clipboard. "We've stabilized her vitals," he said, gently. "But we need to talk about next steps." He explained the tests they'd run: elevated blood levels of multiple substances, evidence of prolonged use, prior hospital records confirming patterns of self-harm, possible cognitive effects. He mentioned rehab facilities, psychiatric evaluations. "She's an adult," the doctor said. "Legally, we can't force her into treatment. She'll need to consent." Evelyn just nodded. She will." But in her gut, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Later that day, Natalie began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze was unfocused at first, then sharpened. The moment she registered her mother, her mouth tightened. "Are you serious?" she croaked, voice hoarse. "You're actually here?" Evelyn leaned forward. "Of course I'm here." Natalie scoffed, tried to sit up, then winced in pain. She looked around the room, eyes darting. "You came to lecture me or fix me?" "I came to take you home." Natalie gave a bitter laugh. "You haven't been my home in years." The conversation spiraled quickly. Evelyn tried to explain the concern, the rehab plan, the specialist she'd called, the flight booked back to Boston. Natalie wasn't having it. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she snapped. "You gave up the right to fix my life the moment you chose your job over me." "That's not fair," Evelyn began. "Fair." Natalie's voice rose. "Was it fair when I spent my birthdays eating cake alone while you were on call? Was it fair when I had a panic attack and had to call an Uber to the ER by myself? Don't show up now like some savior." Her words were like knives. But Evelyn didn't flinch. "I know I failed you," she said softly. "But I'm still your mother. And I'm not leaving you like this." For a moment, the room was quiet. Then Natalie's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just take me?" she whispered. Evelyn froze. And in that second of silence, something shifted. Later that day, Evelyn stepped out of the hospital to call Lucas Hale, Natalie's boyfriend, hoping he could help convince her. He didn't answer at first. When he finally called back, his voice was tight. "She's been different lately," he admitted. "More erratic. More distant. I thought it was stress. I didn't know how bad it was." Evelyn told him everything. The overdose, the rehab plan, the refusal. Lucas promised to talk to her. "Maybe she'll listen to me." But something in his tone sounded unsure. Back inside, Natalie had been discharged from the ICU to a private room. She asked to go home. Against medical advice, she signed the papers. The law was on her side. Evelyn watched helplessly as her daughter got dressed, gathered her things, and walked out of the hospital without a backward glance. It was the first time Evelyn truly felt powerless. As the automatic doors closed behind Natalie's back, a thought came to Evelyn, chilling in its finality. She didn't survive the overdose. Not really. Whatever version of her daughter had been saved last night wasn't the one she had raised. Natalie Reed's Instagram told a story most would envy. A girl with cascading dark hair, sun-kissed skin, and piercing blue eyes. A girl who studied medicine by day, sipped champagne by night. Who traveled solo to Miami, posed poolside in Palm Springs, and wore white silk dresses under strings of fairy lights in backyard garden parties. Her bio read, "Healing the world one heartbeat at a time. Future MD Sparkles." She had 26,000 followers. And none of them had any idea she was dying. 2 weeks before the overdose, Natalie posted a carousel of filtered photos from a rooftop brunch spot in downtown Reno. There was a mimosa in her hand, a designer bag on her lap, and a perfectly styled caption. "Self-care is the new success." But what the filters didn't show was the nearly empty apartment she returned to that night. The disarray, the unopened textbooks, the sticky floor from a party the night before, and the half-crushed pill bottle on the bathroom counter. She hadn't attended classes in over a month. Her university account was on probation. Her tuition was overdue, despite her mother sending her monthly support without fail. In her apartment complex, neighbors knew her as the girl with loud music. She threw parties almost weekly. Not wild ravers, just gatherings. With people who stayed too long and left too much behind. Vodka bottles, ashtrays, crumpled wrappers, unnamed prescriptions. She always smiled when someone new came over. But she never talked about her coursework, or her family, or the quiet moments between the selfies. The truth was, Natalie had grown addicted. Not just to substances, though those had taken root. She was addicted to being seen. When she first moved to Nevada, Natalie was nobody. A transfer student. A girl trying to follow her mother's footsteps in a sea of strangers. But social media changed that. It started with casual posts. A library selfie. A late-night coffee captioned, "Surviving med school." Then came the viral post, a sunlit mirror pic in her bedroom, jeans half-zipped, with the caption, "Brains and beauty. Who says we can't have both?" The internet loved it. DMs flooded in. Comments praised her. Follows surged. For the first time in years, Natalie felt validated. Not by her professors. Not by her emotionally distant father or her chronically busy mother. But by complete strangers. So she leaned in. More posts. More curated outfits. Makeup tutorials. Product links. Affiliate codes. Soon she was getting packages, PR from skincare brands, invitations to influencer meetups. People started calling her the med school model. But behind that curated persona, Natalie's real life was falling apart. She was failing physiology. She stopped attending labs. She missed exams. Her academic advisor tried to reach her multiple times. But Natalie ghosted everyone, even herself. Instead, she turned to things that made her feel instantly better. Adderall to study. Benzos to sleep. Coke to socialize. Sometimes all three in a day. She had a friend, briefly, who tried to warn her. Jasmine Blake, another student from her neuroanatomy course. Jasmine saw Natalie at a party, red-eyed, laughing at nothing, pupils like saucers, and tried to intervene. "Hey," Jasmine said. "You okay? You look kind of off." Natalie smiled too wide. "I'm amazing." That was the last time Jasmine saw her on campus. Meanwhile, Evelyn had no idea. She continued wiring money. Continued liking her daughter's posts. Sometimes she left comments under the photos. Small hearts, affirmations like, "So proud of you." Once, she called on a Sunday afternoon. No answer. She left a voicemail. Natalie texted back 2 hours later. "Sorry, phone was on silent. All good though. Love you." Evelyn had believed it. She had to. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The man who eventually uncovered the truth wasn't a detective or a doctor. It was Lucas Hale, Natalie's boyfriend. Lucas was a law student. Tall, quiet, thoughtful. He liked poetry and dogs and took his coffee black. He met Natalie at a photography exhibit. She had been standing alone, staring at a photo of a girl submerged underwater. He said, "You like drowning girls?" She smiled. "I like the ones who look like they're pretending not to drown." That should have been a warning. But Lucas was smitten. At first, Natalie was mysterious. A little chaotic. She'd show up late to dates but apologize with spontaneous kisses. She'd sleep for 12 hours, then stay up for 2 days. She said her schedule was just med school stuff. Lucas believed her, until the inconsistencies piled up. She couldn't name any of her professors. She never had textbooks. Once, when he asked how her clinical rotation was going, she blinked and changed the subject. One night, he found her curled on the bathroom floor, sweating, mumbling, her phone buzzing with overdue bill reminders. He carried her to bed. She barely spoke for 2 days. After that, she changed the locks to her apartment and didn't answer his calls for weeks. He didn't tell Evelyn. He didn't even know her. But he started keeping notes. Out of worry. Out of fear. Out of confusion. When Evelyn eventually called him from the hospital after the overdose, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew something was wrong," he said. "I just didn't know how deep it went." Evelyn listened quietly, then asked the question she'd been afraid to voice. "Do you think she wants help?" There was a long pause. "I think she doesn't know what help is anymore." 3 days later, Natalie was discharged against medical advice. She went back to her apartment, alone. Lucas dropped by that evening. She let him in. She smiled. She kissed him like nothing had changed. They had wine. She changed clothes. They watched part of a movie. Then, somewhere between a joke and a kiss, she whispered, "I'm done pretending." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Natalie leaned back against the couch cushion. Her lipstick smudged slightly. Her pupils dilated. Her smile too calm. I already let go," she said. "The rest of you just haven't noticed yet." He didn't know what to say. So he stayed. But that night, after she passed out on the couch, he noticed something strange, the kitchen knife block on the table. One slot empty. He checked her coat pocket and found 2 pill bottles. One was empty. He took a deep breath and quietly took her apartment key. The glamour was gone. And what remained was a girl with a broken mind, a fragile heart, and a growing shadow of something darker. The masks were slipping, and something underneath was beginning to take over. It was a Thursday night. The city of Reno had just quieted under a light autumn drizzle, its neon buzz softened by the misty glass of apartment windows. Inside Unit 3B, however, the silence was an illusion. Natalie Reed was pacing. Not in a hurried or nervous way, but slow, deliberate, almost like she was waiting for something or someone. A cigarette smoldered in an ashtray, long forgotten. A jazz playlist hummed through her speakers, low and distorted by the cheap Bluetooth connection. The lights were dimmed, casting amber shadows across the hardwood floor. The air smelled of citrus perfume layered atop something sharper, alcohol, and something burned. Lucas Hale stood at the door with a small bag of takeout and an expression that was equal parts worry and routine exhaustion. He had been here too many times before. Natalie greeted him like nothing was wrong. Her makeup was fresh, her hair curled, her eyes sparkling in a way Lucas had learned to mistrust. She kissed him on the cheek, took the food, and poured them both a drink, whiskey this time, not wine. Lucas watched her closely. Her hands trembled slightly when she set the glasses down. He didn't say anything at first, but something in the air felt different. Not manic. Not depressive. Just disconnected. "Have you slept?" he asked gently. Natalie smiled. "What sleep?" Her voice was playful, but it hit him wrong. They ate in silence. Natalie barely touched her food. She scrolled on her phone with one hand, the screen lighting up her face, her thumb scrolling absently. Lucas, across from her, finally leaned forward. "You should talk to someone," he said. "Your mom's trying." "I'm trying. But you're not letting anyone in." Natalie didn't look up. "Maybe I don't want anyone in," she said flatly. Lucas exhaled. "Natalie, this can't go on." She looked at him then, not with anger, but with something colder. "Why do you think everyone wants to fix me? Maybe I don't need fixing. Maybe I'm finally free." "Free from what?" She tilted her head. "From pretending." He stayed for another hour. They watched half a movie. She laughed too hard at the wrong parts. Then, just before midnight, Natalie fell asleep on the couch, curled up in a blanket, her breathing shallow and slow. Lucas covered her gently, then sat beside her. He didn't want to leave. But something gnawed at him. The last thing she said before nodding off was a whisper. She always wanted to control me. She thought she owned me. But she was wrong. He didn't ask who she was. He knew. When Natalie began snoring softly, Lucas stood and walked quietly to her coat, draped over the kitchen chair. He slid his hand into the pocket and pulled out a familiar keychain. Small, silver, shaped like a stethoscope. Evelyn's gift. Attached to it was a copy of Natalie's apartment key. Lucas hesitated. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. But his instincts, sharpened not by legal training, but by something more primal, told him he needed to know what she was hiding. It was nearly 1:30 a.m. when he slipped into her apartment alone. Natalie was still asleep at his place. He drove slowly. The building was quiet. The hallway even quieter. When he opened the door, the stench hit him first. It wasn't decay, not yet, but blood. Sharp, iron-like, unmistakable. He stepped inside, heart racing. The living room lights were off, but a lamp in the kitchen flickered faintly. Then he saw it. The floor. Streaks of crimson smeared across the hardwood. Drops trailing from the hallway to the kitchen. More on the countertop. A smear on the fridge. He walked carefully, following the path. The kitchen was worse. On the table sat a large butcher knife, half-wiped, still stained. Next to it, a pair of yellow dish gloves soaked in red. On the floor, just beneath the sink, was a pile of soaked towels, and what looked like tissue. Not paper. Flesh. His stomach turned. He moved toward the bathroom. The door was cracked open. Inside, a pair of women's shoes, still damp, blood pooled near the drain. No body. Just viscera. Pieces. Like a butchered animal. Lucas stumbled backward. He had to get out. He called 911. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, they found him seated on the curb, shaking. His voice trembled as he explained. They checked the apartment. Sealed it immediately. Hazmat suits. Evidence tags. Photographs. Samples. But no corpse. Only blood. And body parts, identified later as belonging to a woman in her late 40s to 50s. DNA tests would later confirm it was Dr. Evelyn Carter. Back at Lucas's apartment, Natalie was gone. She had slipped out sometime after 2 a.m. unnoticed. By 3 a.m., an APB was issued statewide. Security cameras caught her walking alone down Sierra Street, dressed in a hoodie, her face half covered by her long hair. She looked calm. Unbothered. She carried nothing. The official manhunt began before sunrise. Authorities traced her last credit card transaction, a rideshare from downtown to a suburban address on the edge of Reno. It was a dead end. She never arrived. Her phone was off. Social media silent. Her friends? None had seen her. But one thing was clear. This was no accident. No breakdown. It was a deliberate, organized killing, performed with precision and knowledge of anatomy. As if she had planned it. The investigation into Evelyn's death uncovered chilling details. Neighbors recalled hearing muffled yelling the previous evening. Someone had heard a scream around 11:15 p.m., but thought it was a television. The building's dumpster, later examined, contained what remained of Evelyn's purse, ID shredded, bloodied clothing, and a half-empty box of latex gloves. Natalie had cleaned, scrubbed, showered, and then vanished. Lucas was brought in for questioning. His story held up. His fingerprints were on nothing inside the crime scene. The key he used matched Natalie's spare. The horror on his face was real. The guilt, because he had been with her, had held her, just hours after she murdered her mother. And she had smiled at him. Like nothing happened. Across the city, digital billboards flashed her photo. News anchors dubbed her the wellness mask killer. Twitter lit up with speculation. Instagram accounts began sharing old clips of Natalie in designer clothes, captions like, "This girl killed her mother and went on a date after." She became both monster and mystery, influencer and infamy. And Evelyn Carter, the woman who saved lives for a living, became a body with no name on the evening news. But this was only the beginning. Because Natalie wasn't just running from arrest. She was chasing something darker. By the time Lucas Hale found his breath again, the police were already in motion. His 911 call had been short and shaking. He didn't even remember what he said, only that his mouth felt dry and his hands wouldn't stop trembling. The operator had repeated his location 3 times before dispatching officers. But Natalie wasn't there. She had slipped away sometime between midnight and 2 a.m., like fog leaving glass. She didn't take her phone, her wallet, or her keys. Just left. And somehow, even that departure was clean. Lucas couldn't stop hearing her voice. I already let go. The rest of you just haven't noticed yet. 2 hours earlier, it had been just another evening. They were seated across from each other at a quiet rooftop lounge in Midtown Reno, sharing a bottle of Brut Rose and watching the city glitter below. Natalie had dressed up, all white, silk blouse tucked into pleated high-waisted pants, hair perfectly curled, makeup soft but precise. No one would have suspected the blood beneath her nails, still faint under a coat of polish. The server complimented her earrings. She smiled warmly, thanked her, and leaned back into the cushions like a woman at peace. Lucas was less at ease. He had sensed something all night, not just detachment, but a strange kind of completion. Like she had closed a chapter no one else knew was ending. He asked gently, "Do you want to talk about earlier? About the hospital?" She shook her head, sipping her wine. "No," she said. "Tonight's not about grief." Then came the moment. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder. No trembling hands. Just a pause in conversation, her voice dropping 1 octave lower. "I did something," she said. "And I don't think I'm sorry." Lucas tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Natalie looked directly at him. Her gaze didn't waver. "I killed my mom." There was a beat. A long, confused silence. Lucas let out a soft, incredulous laugh, thinking it was a joke. Some exaggerated metaphor for emotional distance. But Natalie didn't laugh with him. She kept staring. "Even. I mean it." Lucas set his glass down. "Natalie." "She came to take me back," Natalie said, her voice still steady. "Back to Boston. Back to rehab. Back to being her problem to fix." "You don't mean this." "I asked her to leave. She wouldn't. She kept talking like I was 12. She tapped her temple. Like I didn't already know who I am." Lucas stood up. "Stop. Just stop." But she didn't. "She bled a lot," Natalie continued, her voice now distant, as if narrating a dream. "You'd be surprised how warm it is. And how fast it gets cold." Lucas's knees almost buckled. He had studied criminal law, read deposition transcripts, observed murder defendants in mock court. But nothing prepared him for this. This wasn't rage. This wasn't grief. It was clarity. He left without a word. She didn't try to stop him. He looked back once, just before getting into his car. Natalie was still at the table, sipping her wine, gazing out over the city like it belonged to her. Like she was done with it already. By sunrise, the entire city knew her name. Natalie Reed, suspected in murder of Dr. Mother, on the run. Photos from her Instagram were plastered on every channel, smiling in scrubs, standing beside her Jeep, holding a glass of wine by a rooftop pool. The contrast was sickening. Reporters dug deep fast. Archived interviews from med school orientation, TikToks of Natalie dancing with friends, captions now interpreted as warning signs. One, posted months before the killing, read, "When they stop seeing you as a daughter, you stop pretending to be one." It had been seen as edgy then. Now it was chilling. Law enforcement launched a full-scale search. The last confirmed sighting was at 2:14 a.m., a blurry gas station camera on the city's north end. Natalie had entered alone, bought a bottled water and a prepaid phone, and left. She paid cash. From there, she disappeared. Her social media accounts went dark. Her old phone was never turned back on. Credit cards, bank accounts, email, all inactive. She left no breadcrumbs. The girl who once posted 6 times a day had gone silent. But the real horror wasn't just her disappearance. It was what the forensic team found. Evelyn Carter's remains had been mutilated with clinical precision. The coroner's report, leaked a week later, used the word dissected. Organs had been removed methodically, with knowledge of surgical entry points. The knife wounds avoided major bone and cartilage structures, indicating anatomical familiarity. This wasn't a frenzy. It was intentional, almost academic. And even more chilling, Evelyn had been alive during the first incisions. The case moved from homicide to premeditated torture and murder. Lucas was brought back in for another round of questioning. He told them everything. The dinner, the confession, her tone, her stillness. But one detail he hesitated on, until a detective asked directly. Did she seem proud? Lucas swallowed. No, not proud, he said. Resolved. There was a long silence in the interview room. And after she said it, the detective asked, "What did you do?" Lucas answered, voice low. "I ran." Across the internet, a storm was brewing. True crime communities dissected the case in real time. Theories exploded. Was Natalie psychotic? Was she abused? Was Evelyn controlling? Was this the result of drug-induced psychosis, or something worse? A hidden, long-form transformation into a calculated killer? Some sympathized. Others were furious. One Reddit thread called her America's Pretty Hannibal. Another dubbed her the Smiling Surgeon. She had become myth before she was even caught. But law enforcement wasn't done. They had a lead. A fingerprint, partially smudged, on a motel receipt outside Carson City. A camera sighting in a used clothing store, Natalie in a wig and sunglasses. And most promising of all, a ping from the prepaid phone she bought. 52 hours later, across state lines. She was still moving, still watching, and somewhere, still Natalie. At 7:43 a.m., 56 hours after Natalie Reed vanished, the first ping came through. A prepaid phone, registered anonymously, connected briefly to a public Wi-Fi hotspot outside a convenience store in Elko, Nevada, more than 300 miles from Reno. The signal lasted less than 2 minutes. But it was enough. Enough to confirm what law enforcement had already feared. Natalie wasn't lying low. She was on the move. The task force had already named her a high-risk fugitive. Not because she had crossed state lines. Not because of the gruesomeness of the crime. But because she wasn't running like someone afraid. She was running like someone who had a plan. No panic purchases. No ATM withdrawals. No calls to known contacts. Every trace of her former identity, student, daughter, influencer, was being methodically erased. By the time the FBI joined the investigation, she had already shed the name Natalie Reed like a snake sheds its skin. And somewhere out there was a woman who looked like Natalie, but was no longer her. Investigators began the grim task of reverse reconstruction, tracking the things Natalie no longer used. The Jeep Wrangler she once drove was found parked in a long-term garage 2 blocks from the train station, locked and clean. Inside, a burner phone with the SIM card snapped, a travel-sized makeup kit, and a folded piece of paper. On it, a single sentence scribbled in black pen. "You all wanted a story, so I gave you one." No fingerprints. From there, the trail went cold, until day 5. A motel manager in Twin Falls, Idaho, flagged a female guest for suspicious behavior. Paid cash, no ID, wore a wig, avoided eye contact. She left before checkout. The cleaning staff found a sink full of hair dye, a discarded prepaid phone, and, stuffed deep in the trash, a used pair of colored contact lenses. When shown Natalie's wanted poster, the manager's hands shook. "That's her," he said. Only she had brown eyes. Meanwhile, media coverage exploded. The story had crossed oceans. CNN, The Guardian, Der Spiegel. Headlines compared her to Amanda Knox, Casey Anthony, and Lizzie Borden, but none fit perfectly. Natalie wasn't trying to clear her name. She wasn't giving interviews. She wasn't pleading innocence. She was just gone. Vanished like vapor, leaving only blood, chaos, and a mother's corpse behind her. Back in Reno, Lucas Hale had stopped leaving his apartment. Reporters camped outside his building. Twitter theorists accused him of helping Natalie escape. True crime TikTokers called him the boyfriend who stayed. Some praised his calm, others vilified his silence. Lucas refused all interviews. He spent his days replaying everything, every word, every look, every silence between them, trying to catch the moment she changed. But that was the worst part. There was no moment. There was no switch he could point to and say, "That's when she became a killer." Because maybe she had been breaking all along. Federal agents began widening their search radius. They combed Greyhound terminals, cross-checked bus manifests, interviewed rideshare drivers across 4 states. Then came a tip from Spokane, Washington. A woman matching Natalie's general description had been seen entering a small medical clinic on the outskirts of town. She paid cash for a prescription anti-anxiety medication under the name Lena Carson. Security footage confirmed it. The woman wore no wig this time. Just a hooded rain jacket, thick glasses, and a surgical mask. Her face was half obscured, but the posture, the gait, the way she gripped the pen as she signed the intake form, it was unmistakable. It was Natalie. But when the agents arrived 36 hours later, she was gone again. This time, she had left a note, slipped under the receptionist's keyboard. Not handwritten. Printed. Just 7 words. "What do you think freedom looks like?" Psychological profilers stepped in. They described Natalie as a fragmented narcissist, fueled by resentment, rejection, and identity disintegration. Her obsession with performance, on social media, in medicine, in life, created a need to control how the world saw her. Once that control broke, so did her moral frame. But the truth was harder to categorize. She wasn't lashing out in a moment of heat. She had disassembled her identity and was now building something new. Day 12. Another confirmed sighting, this time in Montana. A bus station security guard recognized her, but too late. She had bought a one-way ticket to a town in Wyoming, name redacted from the manifest. The woman now known as Lena Carson had no digital footprint, no credit history, and no traceable device. Just a canvas duffel bag and a map, old school, folded, worn. When asked later why he remembered her, the guard said, "She smiled at me, but not like a traveler. Like someone who knew I wouldn't stop her." The manhunt crossed its 3rd week. A female homicide suspect hadn't evaded federal tracking this successfully since the days of pre-digital records. Authorities began reaching out to the public again. Billboards updated her appearance using facial reconstruction AI. Shorter hair. No makeup. Different jawline, perhaps surgery. But something about it never matched the coldness witnesses described. Natalie's expression had changed. It wasn't just about disguise. She had killed the girl she used to be. Now she wore her new face like armor. On day 21, a field agent in Missoula received an envelope. No return address. Inside, a photo. Black and white. Printed on glossy paper. Natalie, seated at a diner booth, smiling at the camera. In front of her, coffee, eggs, a local newspaper. Dated just 3 days prior. Scrawled in Sharpie across the bottom. "You're always 2 steps behind. Try to keep up." At that moment, the case changed again. It was no longer a fugitive pursuit. It was a psychological chess game. And Natalie? She was enjoying it. 32 days. That's how long it had been since the last confirmed sighting of Natalie Reed, or whatever name she had taken by then. No new pings. No receipts. No blurred security footage. Just dead air. Until one afternoon, a letter arrived. A plain white envelope. Mailed from a town no one expected, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Inside was no confession. No threats. No apology. Just one line. Her name was never Natalie. And a single item taped beneath the sentence. A faded student ID card. From a community college in Mississippi, belonging to a woman named Margaret Lane. The photo looked familiar, but not quite Natalie. The FBI reviewed the card. It wasn't a forgery. Margaret Lane had been a real person, born in 1995, dropped out of school after 1 semester, disappeared after a domestic violence incident. Her records went cold in 2018. No taxes filed. No social media. Nothing. And then she reappeared as Natalie Reed. Suddenly, the entire case refracted like light through glass. It raised questions no one was ready to answer. Was Natalie ever real? Was Evelyn Carter her biological mother, or something more complicated? The DNA match had been clear, but now even that came into question. Analysts dug through birth certificates, hospital registries, family court records. There was no birth certificate under the name Natalie Carter Reed. Only Evelyn Carter as a single mother listed in 2002, with no father on file. That child's name? Rachel N. Carter. Rachel had disappeared from public records around 2018. The same year Margaret Lane went dark, and Natalie Reed appeared online. What emerged was a chilling possibility. Natalie didn't just kill her mother. She had erased herself, not in one moment of panic, but through years of quiet, strategic rebranding. She was a shapeshifter, not in body, but in identity. A woman who turned names into costumes, one after another, until no one, not even the law, could catch her. Back in New Mexico, investigators moved quickly. They canvassed truth or consequences block by block. Laundromats, roadside diners, trailer parks, rental cabins. Finally, a break. A motel manager remembered a woman staying for 3 nights under the name Emily Graves. Paid cash. Wore gloves in 95-degree heat. Asked for extra bleach. The room had been cleaned after her checkout. Nothing remained, except, under the mattress, tucked deep inside the wooden frame, a burner phone, smashed flat. The SIM card had been destroyed, but inside the phone's internal storage, one item survived. A draft text message. Never sent. You'll never know which part of me was real. Maybe none of it. After that, the trail ended. Completely. No more letters. No more sightings. No more whispers. The task force was officially disbanded on day 103. Natalie Reed, or Rachel Carter, or Margaret Lane, or Emily Graves, was gone. Not dead. Not caught. Just gone. In the months that followed, her story faded from front pages. New tragedies took her place. But her legend, if we can call it that, lingered in shadows. University psychology departments studied the case. Documentaries were drafted. Podcasts speculated on the pathology. Was she psychotic? Antisocial? A high-functioning manipulator? But the most haunting theory wasn't clinical. It was this. She never had a true identity to begin with. She had been trying on lives, like clothes in a department store, searching for one that finally felt like home. Lucas Hale never gave another interview. But 2 years later, he published a short story under a pseudonym. It was fictional, legally speaking. But readers knew. The story was titled, The Girl Who Vanished Twice. The closing line? I don't know if she ever loved anyone, but I know she learned how to make us believe she did. And Evelyn Carter? Her grave sits in a quiet cemetery outside Boston. No fanfare. Just a stone with a name and date. And a phrase her colleagues chose. She healed others, even when she couldn't reach the one who mattered most. Natalie's Instagram is still up. Frozen. Untouched. The last post is still visible. A mirror selfie in soft golden light, her hand over her heart. The caption reads, In the end, there's only the story. No one knows if she meant her life, or the one she created. But maybe that's the point. Because some people disappear to escape justice. But others? They disappear to escape themselves. And no headline, no manhunt, no investigation, can ever find what was never truly there to begin with.